In J.R.R. Tolkien's world, when we talk about Sauron, there's a lot to talk about. Especially, why did Sauron put an inscription on the One Ring? If this question bothers you too, well, stay with us till the end of the video to find the answer, and let's get started. When we talk of Sauron, first of all, we need to know that his name was Mairon. The first few years he worked for Ole, the blacksmith of the Valar, which was pretty cool because he learned from the coolest craftsman in the world. Mairon, on the other hand, really liked things to be in order. He hated things that were rough or disorganized. That's when things started to go wrong. One day he meets Melkor, who is the ultimate rebel and kind of the bad boy of the Valar. Melkor wants to be powerful and change the world in any way he sees fit. Who is Mairon? Well, he seems pretty impressed. He starts to think, maybe this guy is right. Then all of a sudden, Mairon changes teams and joins Melkor instead of Ole. In an instant, he goes from being a nice guy to the second scariest guy in the world. Mairon gets a new name for the new job, Sauron, which means the Abhorred. That doesn't sound like a name that says friendly neighborhood Maya now, does it? In the early days of Middle-earth, Melkor, who is now called Morgoth for some reason, builds two strongholds. These are called Utumno and Angband. Morgoth hangs out in Utumno, and Sauron, who is his right-hand man, is in charge of Angband. It's like running the bad branch office as a boss. The bad guys are having a great time until the Valar decide they've had enough of Morgoth's axe. They fight with a huge force in what is called the Battle of the Powers. Their main target is Utumno. As always, the Valar win, and they even look around Angband, but Sauron gets away because he's sneaky. Morgoth is caught and frozen in Valinor for almost 3,000 years. In the meantime, Sauron stays in Middle-earth and plans things until his boss comes back. Morgoth does come back in the end, but not in a sneaky way. Not at all. He sneaks out of Valinor, takes the Silmarils, and kills the two trees that give the world its light. What does the Valar say? Okay, fine. And so they make the sun and the moon, which was pretty important. Also, the first humans wake up at this time, which is a big deal because Morgoth sees them as new people to join his evil army. He goes east to make them evil, leaving Sauron in charge of the war in Beleriand between the dark forces and the elves. In the First Age, the elves and their friends make things very hard for Morgoth. He only gets a few small wins in the first 455 years, but then, in 455, Morgoth does something very big. It's called the Dagor Bragolach, which means the Battle of Sudden Flame. The fields of Unveiled and the kingdom of Dorthonion are being destroyed by a huge firestorm that sets everything on fire in its path. Morgoth is having a great time. When Fingolfin, the High King of the Noldor, sees how much damage has been done, he rides right to Angband and challenges Morgoth to a fight. Finnbog fights bravely, but in the end, Morgoth beats him up, making the scene look like it belongs in an epic movie. Now that the High King is out of the way, Sauron sees a chance and takes over the island of Tol-Sirion, calling it Tol-in-Gaurhoth, which means the Isle of Werewolves. Yes, there are werewolves, and guess what? They were made by Sauron. He took regular wolves and used some dark magic to make them into scary animals that were full of evil spirits. And if that wasn't scary enough, Sauron could change into a huge wolf, a snake, or even a vampire whenever he felt like it. Morgoth gave Sauron a job to do after the big battle to kill this group of thieves led by Barahir and his son Beren. These two have been making things hard for Morgoth's armies. Gorlim is one of the thieves that Sauron captures by making him think that his lost wife is still alive. Gorlim, who's desperate and hurt, tells Sauron where the thieves are hiding. Being the evil person that he is, Sauron says it was all a cruel trick, and then he kills Gorlim anyway. In the year 460 of the First Age, Sauron's armies attack the hideout and kill everyone except Beren, who gets away. Beren turns into a one-man rebellion, which makes things very difficult for Sauron and Morgoth. There is a reward for Beren's life set by Morgoth, and Sauron sends his werewolves and other scary animals to find him. When Beren runs south, he meets Luthien, Thingol's daughter and the daughter of Doriath's king. Beren is given an impossible job by Thingol because he doesn't like it that his daughter's dating a normal person, and the task is to steal a Silmaril from Morgoth's crown. Pretty simple, right? Well, Beren works with Luthien, Finrod, Galadriel's brother, and a few other elves to try to pull off this crazy theft. They dress up as orcs to get around Sauron's island, but Sauron is smart. After catching them, he finds out that they are not who they say they are. When they don't tell him what they're up to, Sauron throws them into a pit and feeds a monster each one at a time. Finrod, being the brave elf that he is, gives up his life to save Beren. He kills the werewolf but then dies from his wounds. At the same time, Luthien shows up at Sauron's door and sings a beautiful song that sleeps Sauron's servants. When Sauron sees her from his tower, he plans to capture her and give her to Morgoth, but he doesn't think much of her. Huan, the Hound of Valinor, is with her, and the two of them kill every monster Sauron sends their way. Finally, Sauron himself shows up to fight. He changes into the biggest, meanest monster you could think of. He tries, but he can't beat Huan. After a fierce fight, Huan pins Sauron down. Sauron gives up the island in exchange for his life rather than face the consequences. After that, he slips away, turns into a vampire, and hides in the dark woods of Taur Nu Furin to lick his wounds. After 80 years, the Valar finally decided to put an end to Morgoth's threat. The Maya Inanwe leads the host of the West to kill him for good. The Roar of Wrath then starts a 40-year fight that pretty much breaks Beleriand apart. Morgoth is finally beaten, caught, and sent to the Void, where he will never come back. When Sauron sees that his boss is doomed, he tries to be nice by changing into a fair person and acting like he feels bad about what he did. Even though Eonwe tells him to go back to Valinor and be judged there, Sauron doesn't want to live that way. He instead hides in Middle-earth and plans his next move. Now that Morgoth is gone, Sauron decides to take over as Dark Lord. Sauron is still sore from the War of the Wrath at the start of the Second Age. Someone told him to make things right by going to Valinor, but Sauron is too proud to do that. He would rather hide out in Middle-earth and plan his next evil plan. After about 500 years, he sees that the Valar don't seem to be paying much attention to Middle-earth, so he decides to continue where Morgoth left off. People in the east and south, who are already affected by Morgoth's dark magic, are the first to be affected by Sauron. A lot of people are happy to follow him and be influenced by him. Gil-galad, the High King of the Noldor, starts to feel that something's wrong in the east around the year 882 of the Second Age. While Morgoth is no longer there, he warns Númenor that a new power is coming and they need to be ready for war. Sauron decides he needs a base around the year 1000 of the Second Age because he can see that the Númenorians are getting stronger. He chooses Mordor as his home place and begins building Barad-dûr, his dark tower near Mount Doom. But Sauron's always getting things ready. His mind is clear that he needs to be careful about who he picks next. He could go after the men of Númenor, but they aren't ready to be shaped yet. He instead turns his attention to the Elves of Eriador. That would make it a lot easier for him to take over Middle-earth if he can get them to help him. Sauron gets stronger behind closed doors for the next 200 years. He finally made up his mind to move in the year 1200. He changes into a fair creature and calls himself Anatar, the Lord of Gifts. He then goes to Eriador and says he is a messenger from the Valar. Anatar talks very well, and he tries to win the elves over by offering to teach them new things. But Gil-galad and Elrond, who are both very smart, think something's wrong and they won't let him into Lindon. Anatar does not give up and makes his way to Eregion, where Celebrimbor, the best elf blacksmith of all time, is in charge. Celebrimbor and his people are thrilled to have Annatar as a teacher because she is so good. They learn from Sauron how to make strong rings over the next few decades, but he has a secret plan. Sauron sneaks back to Mordor and makes the One Ring, a master ring that controls all the others, while the elves are busy making their rings of power. That's the best cheat code ever, and Sauron aims to use it to take over Middle-earth for good. A well-known saying is written on the ring, Ash Nazg Durbatuluk, Ash Nazg Gimbatul, Ash Nazg Thraktuluk, Ash Brusum Ishi Krimpotul. One of the first things Sauron, the Dark Lord, does when he gets the ring is finish making. He takes it to Barad-dûr, a dark tower, and connects the ring to the very base of it. But as soon as he put the ring on his finger, the elves, who were smart, saw through his trick. The other elves and Celebrimbor, the head of the elves, knew they'd been lied to. 16 rings were hidden by Celebrimbor in a vault in Eregion. He then sent the 3 rings he had made himself to Gil-galad in Lindon and Galadriel in Lothlorien. Sauron wanted these 3 elf rings. He asked the elves for all the power rings, but they refused, and this set off the War of the Elves and Sauron, which was bound to happen. Then Sauron built the Black Gate of Mordor to keep his land safe and started to gather an army of orcs, trolls, and humans who worshipped him as a god-king. He got a lot of support from people in the east and south, but there were still some who didn't want to follow him. This may have been because of the work of the Blue Wizards. These people fought back against Sauron's plan, so he didn't start his war on Eredor until 95 years after making the One Ring. Elrond led an army sent by Gil-galad to help the elves when they were attacked, and he also asked Númenor to help. The city of Ost-in-Edhil was destroyed after 2 years of fierce fighting. Celebrimbor was taken over, and Eregion was left in ruins. Sauron almost destroyed Elrond's army, but the dwarves of Khazad-dûm attacked Sauron from behind. This gave Elrond a chance to take the survivors north, where they built Rivendell. After torturing Celebrimbor, Sauron found the 16 rings, but Celebrimbor wouldn't say where the 3 elf rings were. He was killed by Sauron, who waved his body around during the battle. Sauron had taken over almost all of Eredor by 1699, and the elves in Lindon and Rivendell were in great danger. Sauron was very strong and ruled over more land than he ever would again. But just when things looked bad, the people of Númenor stepped up to help in 1700 of the Second Age. They made the elves stronger and pushed Sauron back to Sarnford, where he lost again, and then to Tharbad. Another Númenorian fleet struck from the southwest, but Sauron didn't know about it. Gil-galad and the others attacked from the north. Sauron's army was wiped out, and he just barely made it out alive. In 1701 SA, when Sauron finally went back to Mordor, he only had a small guard left for him. After Gil-galad beat the last of Sauron's forces in Eredor, he was fully defeated. Even though Sauron would never be as strong as he was when he took over Eredor, his enemies were also very weak, so he wasn't in any immediate danger. The Númenorians, on the other hand, made Sauron very angry because they had taken away his win. He chose to go after other Middle-earth races instead. It was impossible to make the dwarf lords obey him, so he gave them 7 rings. The other 9 rings were given to men, including 3 Númenorian lords, an Easterling king named Khamûl, and 5 other men he didn't know. These 9 men rose to power as rulers, fighters, and sorcerers. Eventually, they faded away, and in 2251 SA became the Ringwraiths, Sauron's most powerful slaves. Even though he had lost the Battle of Eredor more than 1,500 years before, Sauron was sure he could become powerful again. He said that he was the king of people and lord of the earth. By that time, Númenor had become bad, and its masters had turned mean and away from the Valar. Ar-Pharazôn, one of the worst kings of Númenor, was angry about Sauron's titles. In 3262, Ar-Pharazôn flew a huge fleet to Umbar and then marched to Mordor. Sauron's forces ran away in fear because they knew they couldn't beat Númenor's strength. Once Sauron saw that he could not win by force, he gave up and was taken back to Númenor as a prisoner. But Sauron was smart, and he quickly became the king's top advisor. He persuaded the king to cut down the holy white tree and build a shrine to worship Morgoth, where people would be killed as sacrifices to the Dark Lord. In the year 3310, Second Age, Sauron talked Ar-Pharazôn into taking the Valar's lands by force so that they couldn't die. For the next 9 years, Númenor built the world's best navy. Sauron stayed in the Temple of Melkor, while Ar-Pharazôn set sail for Valinor. But when the Númenorians got to Valinor, Eru, the Maker, stepped in. The world was broken, and Ar-Pharazôn and his army were buried. Númenor was also sunk into the sea. The damage destroyed Sauron's body, but his spirit lived on. He went back to Middle-earth in 3320 SA, where he was weak and started to get stronger. But after that, he could no longer be fair. He gave up, manipulating people, and fully accepted ruling through fear and force. He rose to power and became the next great Dark Lord. Some Númenorians who had lived in places like Umbar made it out alive and stayed true to Sauron. They became known as the Black Númenorians. The faithful, who were true to the Valar, lived through it all and built the lands of Gondor and Arnor. And these people turned into Sauron's worst enemies. In 3429 SA, he attacked them to stop them from getting too strong. Isildur was forced to leave Minas Ithil by Sauron's armies. He then ran to the north to find his father. The last alliance of elves and men were formed when Gil-galad and the Númenorians joined forces against Sauron again. They were caught off guard by orcs sent by Sauron, and the Entwives fields were burnt down to slow their march to Mordor. Even though he worked hard, the last alliance made it to the Black Gate in 3434 Second Age and won the Battle of Dagorlad, which made the Dead Marshes. It was an attack on Sauron's tower of Barad-dûr for 7 years. In 3441 SA, Sauron finally showed up to fight his enemies. The last alliance had to go back to Mount Doom when the Dark Lord showed up. The men and elves were led by Elendil and Gil-galad, who faced Sauron on the slopes of Orodruin. They were able to beat him, but it cost them their lives. Isildur, Elendil's son, went to where Sauron was lying dead and cut the One Ring off of his finger to honor his father and brother. The spirit of Sauron ran away again, this time to the east. He took 1,000 years to get back to the western parts of Middle-earth. Without the One Ring, it took him a long time to get his body back. When the Third Age started, Sauron used his servants to fight his wars, trying to cut off and kill those who were against him. Because they were afraid that Sauron would get stronger again, the Valar sent 5 Maiar, or witches, to Middle-earth to help the free peoples fight the Dark Lord. Even though many of Sauron's slaves were set free, like the Easterlings, his position in the east still caused chaos and civil war. Around 1050 of the Third Age, a shadow settled in the forest of Greenwood at Amon Lanc, which used to be the home of the elves. People called the place Dol Guldur, which means Hill of Sorcery, because of the dark spirit that lived there. The person who lived there was called the Necromancer. Sauron's power grew over the next 250 years. His evil spread all over Middle-earth. The orcs in the Misty Mountains became more daring, and dragons attacked the dwarves, possibly draining much of the power from their rings during this time. The Nazgul also came back, and in 1300 Third Age, the Witch King started the Kingdom of Angmar. In 1635 TA, a lot of Middle-earth was hit by the Great Plague, which was probably caused by Sauron. The plague destroyed the land, and Gondor had to give up the castles that protected Mordor, which let the Nazgul come back. The two kingdoms of Gondor and Arnor agreed to work together, because they knew they were up against a well-organized enemy. But no matter how hard they tried, the Witch King brought ruin to Arnor. When Angmar was destroyed in 1975 of the Third Age, Arnor was left without a king and on its own. Later, after 5 years, a Balrog woke up in Moria, and this killed King Durin VI and sent the dwarves away from Khazad-dûrn. After that, the Lord of the Nazgul went back to Mordor and killed the last king of Gondor in the year 2050 of the Third Age. Things looked good for Sauron at this point. Dragons and Balrogs had made the dwarves weaker, and Gondor did not have a king. Plus Arnor was gone. But in 2063 Third Age, Gandalf went to Dol Guldur, which made the Necromancer run away to the east. This was the start of the Watchful Peace, which lasted until 2460 Third Age, when Sauron went back to Dol Guldur with the Nazgul taking over Minas Morgul again. Gandalf found out that the Necromancer was Sauron in the year 2850 Third Age. In the year 2941 Third Age, the White Council chose to kick him out of Dol Guldur. To hide his defeat, Sauron ran away to Mordor, where he publicly declared himself king and started rebuilding Barad-dûr. Some fierce Uruk-hai from Mordor briefly take over Ithilien from Gondor in the south. After 5 years, the orcs in the Misty Mountains built fortresses to stop people from going from east to west. The dwarves left Moria a long time ago because of a Balrog. Now Sauron sends orcs and trolls to live there. At about the same time, Sauron sends out a group of Easterlings to attack the lands near Mirkwood and the Anduin River. The Balchoth is the name of these raiders, who attacked the Gondorian lands of Calanardhon in 2510. The Eothiod are a group of men from the north who ride south to help Gondor. Most likely Sauron would have tried to stop them, but Galadriel hides their path with a mist as they pass Dol Guldur. They beat the Balchoth at the Battle of the Field of Celebrant. As a prize, the lands of Calanardhon are given to them, and this area forms the kingdom of Rohan. Even though this is bad news for Sauron, he's still going ahead with his plans. Sauron's armies take King Thrain II in the year 2845. Thrain II is Thorin Oakenshield's father. Sauron takes one of Thrain's powerful rings while he is locked up in Dol Guldur. After 5 years, Gandalf goes to Dol Guldur to look into the strange Necromancer and finds Thrain, who is dying. The Necromancer is Sauron, as Gandalf thought he was. Gandalf tries to get the White Council to do something, but Saruman stops him. Siren Kierkegaard wants to know where Sauron is looking for the One Ring as Sauron's power grows. Sauron finds out that Isildur died in the Gladden Fields in the end and sends his servants to search the area. In the south, Sauron's agents got the Haradrim to fight Gondor, and the Uruk-hai go back to Ithilien to make Gondor weaker. At this point, Sauron is winning in both the north and the south. Mordor and Harad are fighting with Gondor, and orcs in the Misty Mountains and Gundabad are building strongholds that split the land. At the same time, Sauron's power in Dol Guldur keeps growing. Gandalf knows that these things are dangerous, but he also knows that Smaug, the dragon, is an even bigger threat. He rules over Erebor. Rivendell, Lorien, and the north of Middle-earth would fall if Smaug and Sauron worked together. Sauron could also crush Gondor and Rohan. Sauron's power grows, and something called the Shadow of Mordor spreads from his lands to make the people of Gondor sick and hopeless. In the year 2988, this shadow even kills Findulius, who was married to Denethor and had children named Boromir and Faramir. Sauron doesn't take part in the coming war personally. Instead, he mostly acts through his servants, shadows, and one of the Palantir. When the Nazgul stole this Palantir from Minas Ithil, Sauron took it. It lets him talk to others, seeing stones, and see places all over the world. After his wife dies, Denethor starts to use one of these stones to see. It is called the Anor Stone. Even though it's hard for him, Sauron tries to bend the stone to his will, but Denethor's will is too strong. Around the year 3000, Saruman started to use the Orthanc Stone, which is another stone that can be seen. This time Sauron can control the user, which changes Saruman from a danger to an ally, although it's still possible for Saruman to betray Sauron. Going back 9 years, Gollum goes to Mordor to look for Bilbo and the One Ring for himself. He is captured by Sauron's men, tortured for 8 years to get information, and then set free in January 3017. At this point, most people have the wrong idea about Sauron. Sauron is shown in the Peter Jackson movies as a huge eye of flame with no lid. But Sauron did have a body at this time, and probably even earlier when he was in Dol Guldur. In the end, Gollum tells Sam and Frodo that Sauron's black hand only has 4 fingers, but that's enough. What is the Eye of Sauron that the book talks about? Well, Sauron probably had eyes, since Frodo talks about seeing a sharp eye with a fire rim around it. But Sauron is more than just a big eye. Instead, the Eye of Sauron is a symbol of the weapons of his army that stands for his constant watchfulness and sharp awareness, which are made even better by his use of the Palantir. Going back to what Sauron did, Gollum is caught by Aragorn after he is freed in 3017 and taken to the Elves of Mirkwood. Sauron was hoping that letting Gollum go would lead him to the One Ring, so he is worried when Gollum is caught. June 20th, 3018 is when Sauron sends his army to attack Osgiliath. He does this to see how strong Gondor is and to hide the Nazgul's search for the ring. The Nazgul did their job, but Gondor was stronger than Sauron thought it would be. His army is pushed back to Mordor, where he spends the next few months getting ready for a huge attack on Gondor. He also sends some orcs from Dol Guldur to attack Mirkwood on the same day, which lets Gollum get away. Boromir has left Minas Tirith by September 3018. Sauron also learns that Gandalf has been caught by Saruman, and that Saruman has been working against him in secret by stopping Sauron's spies. The Nazgul get messages from Sauron telling them to hurry to Isengard. The ring wraiths find enough hints to get to the Sheer, and then they follow the ring bearer to the edge of Rivendell. Soon after, Sauron learns that Isildur's son, Aragorn, has joined the Fellowship of the Ring. The news makes Sauron hurry up his plan to get his army ready. After Saruman is defeated at Helm's Deep, Pippin and Aragorn look into the Orthanc Stone. Sauron thinks that Aragorn now has the One Ring, which is not true. He sends the Witch King and a huge army to Minas Tirith right away. He sends a big group of Easterlings to attack the northern realm of Dale around the same time as the Battle of Pelennor Fields. The siege and the Battle of Dale start on March 14th and go into March 27th, 2 days after the ring is destroyed. At that point, Sauron's forces give up and are pushed out by the troops of men and dwarves. Sauron's luck doesn't work in the south either. They beat his army at Pelennor Fields, and Merry and Eowyn kill his best servant, the Witch King. Even though Sauron lost, he was still able to weaken Gondor and Rohan, while keeping enough troops in Mordor to beat them. But Gandalf makes Sauron do something else. Aragorn, Éomer, and the Lords of the West are told by the wizard to go straight to Mordor. Sauron is watching Aragorn, the heir to Isildur, run toward the Black Gate, while the smaller army of free peoples moves towards it. He is not paying attention to his land, where 2 hobbits are getting closer and closer to Mount Doom. Faramir puts on the One Ring just as Sauron's about to crush the army of men and end Isildur's line for good. Sauron sees the hobbit at that point and knows he's been tricked. He tells the Nazgul who are still alive to hurry to the mountain. Gollum steps in though. He slips and falls into the fires below while being excited to take the ring back from Frodo. This breaks the ring and takes away Sauron's power. However, when it is about Sauron, one has to talk about the One Ring. It's not just a strong item, it's a lot more than that. The writing on the ring isn't just words, it's a spell that lives, breathes, and carries Sauron's evil intentions. When Sauron made the ring in the burning depths of Mount Doom, he put his anger, his desire to rule, and even a bit of himself into the ring. This is why Sauron's spirit was connected to the ring. It's also why, even though he was defeated when the ring was taken from him, he was able to keep going, get stronger, and get close to getting his full power back. The ring gave Sauron a lot of his old power, and as long as it was around, he could not be completely killed. Gollum's obsession destroys the ring when Frodo and Sam finally get to the fires of Mount Doom. And it's not just a piece of jewelry that is melting down. The ring's being taken apart, which means that a big part of Sauron's soul is being released. And that is the end of Sauron's last chance to rule Middle-earth. That is, Sauron's power goes away when the ring is broken. His forces and strongholds fall, and the big shadow he casts over the world goes away. Sauron doesn't die the way we think of it. His spirit's still there, but it's broken up and can't do much more than hang out as a weak, shapeless ghost. His story starts with a lot of drive and smarts, but it ends with a whisper instead of a bang. The Dark Lord, who wanted to rule over everything, now has nothing. So what do you like the most about Sauron's character? Do share with us in the comment section below.